Alrighty, lads, we are back. This time we talk about the most intriguing villain that I have had the pleasure of playing, fighting, and overall enjoying in any game genre to date. Rainier, also known as Rick Minor, and also known as Rick Blood. He is a unique character for many reasons, but first, before I get ahead of myself, let me lay down the format of this video. First, we shall talk about his history. This will be a chronological tale of all the events in his life leading to the canceled game that he was last seen in. Yeah, this is going to be pretty much the main whole host of the video, I'm not going to lie. Second, we will talk about who he was, a summarization of his character. This will include powers and abilities alongside the knowledge he possessed. Thirdly, we will talk about why he is such a tormented character. Fourth, we'll just more or less address the achievements he's gained and wrapped up the video. You ready? Okay, here we go. So, first off, where does our tale begin? So, hundreds of years ago, long before the kingdoms of man were really existent, before the kingdom of Azilla and Ecclesia, there was a man. He was born and raised in a village. This man had a gift for fighting, a strength both internal and external. Using this gift for fighting, he conducted raids, marched out to war. It's never stated, but it's assumed he was a mercenary, judging by how he remarks that going to war was a choice for him. This was undoubtedly the only skills he possessed in life: strategy and brutality. His rage always simmering at the surface of his bare body as he came crashing down on his foes. During this time frame, Rick Blood would always return to his home, a unremarkable village, and come to a housewife with dinner waiting for them. Well, as all happy couples go, they get married and they try to have a child. This child, though, was the reason why their marriage failed. Yeah, that's right. Whenever mommy and daddy gets together and say that you're not the reason why they're splitting, this child actually was the reason. You see, the child that was born by Rainier, by a father who had taken so many people's lives, the child that he bore was soulless. She was catatonic in every shape of the word. Silent, hollow, dead by all rights except physical. She was a husk of a daughter, a husk of a human. You could stab her, she would have no reaction, no cries, no tears, nothing. You could yell at her, she wouldn't even flinch. You could try to smack her face, her eyes wouldn't even bat. She was hollow. She was empty. She was soulless. And this is all because Rick Minor, her father, had spilled so much blood in his lifetime, killed so many people, that the fate of his daughter was pretty much screwed. But Rick Minor, despite shedding the blood of all he encountered, could not pull himself to shed the blood of his own daughter. Much to the begging of his wife, who pleaded for him to stay and to get rid of their daughter. That their daughter was a lesson from God to stop heading out to war, but instead to stay with his wife's side and try to procreate a second time. Rick couldn't fathom the idea of slaughtering his own daughter, so he left for war again. This time, not out of money or fun, but out of distraction. Well, as the years passed, his daughter around the age of a child, somewhere between 4 to 6, he came home to witness his wife trying to murder their daughter. So, he grabbed his wife and sent her to an insane asylum, never to see his wife ever again. He hated his wife for what she tried to do to their daughter. His wife plagues his dreams to this day, always screaming for him not to leave her, howling in his mind that she loves him and wishes he never left, that she's always there for him, that he abandoned her. Without a night's rest, Rick hired an old woman to care for his daughter while he, yet again, went out to war. This time, after a few years, he came back to ashes. His village, his very home, his peaceful den, had been subjugated to the horrors he had wrought onto other villages. His village was destroyed. He looked everywhere, hoping to find his daughter's remains and her babysitter. All he found was his daughter's soulless corpse. No babysitter was found. In fact, his daughter died sitting in the same chair that she was always paralyzed in, burning away without a scream nor a fuss. Rick spent the rest of his time finding the old woman who abandoned his child. Upon finding her, he didn't listen to her reasons for abandoning his soulless daughter. He killed this old woman with his bare hands, picking up the old woman by the temples of her forehead, pressing his massive hands together, crushing her skull, and mashing her brains like a burger patty. During this time, the world was under siege by a new evil, the evil Lich Kiliani, who used the orcs and lied to them, and he massed up an army so large that he could bring about the Age of Darkness. During this time, it is unknown how or when, but Rick met his end fighting the Lich Kiliani by himself. Shortly after death, the Ancient Heart, using the power of Nibel, the god of light, resurrected Rick to help stop the world from falling to darkness. Meeting with his quote-unquote friends, the Zox Knights, the mage Moonlight, the greatest human mage in the world, imbued the two friends and warriors, Keither and Rick, with the power of the Ancient Heart, making them far greater in strength than any normal man. Fighting and stopping the threat, Rick had died again. Don't worry though, he does this all the time. I'm not joking, he dies like multiple times. Having died again, he resurrects, though this time he has struck a deal with the god of light, Nibel. He would be brought back to life, but to defend the area of the Ancient Heart, to stop something like the Lich Kiliani from ever happening again. Using his mutated strength and his strengthened physique, he realized humanity was far too stupid about the affairs of the world, and he was far too gone to be accepted back into the human hands. With 100 years past, he led a campaign, subjugating the orc tribes and dark elves, becoming the new legendary Rick Blood, the Dark Emperor, where he had vampires, dark elves, orcs, ogres, and even demons under his command. With such a force, he was now bent on conquest, and he was furthermore focused on assembling an army so large and so utterly loyal to his strength that they could wipe out anything that stood before them, whether that be the Lich Kiliani or some other madman bringing about the destruction of the world. Unfortunately, the greatest threat to the Dark Emperor would not be humanity. No, it was instead his own liches and demons. They were loyal to Kiliani this whole time, and used the power of the Ancient Heart to enslave and torture Rick Blood deep in the caves of Hexter where none would find him. Thankfully though, Rick Blood had made some friends, notably the fellow I have a YouTube video on, named Richter, the vampire. The vampire Richter had amazing power and strategy and was able to lead the Dark Legion and break Rick Blood free to enact his vengeance on the Lich Kiliani once again, but this time with the help from the Human Alliance. The battle was so fierce that Moonlight had to awaken the god Nibel, who came over in the form of a mighty dragon and shined his power onto the altar of destruction, destroying everybody. Keither, Rick Blood, Kiliani, Moonlight, Selene the Elf Queen, and Curian the Human King. Destroy is kind of a harsh word. What I mean is that these individuals were transported into the Dark Dimension, a realm where the souls of the dead go, and the realm that would manifest into the world when the Age of Darkness comes. This realm is rife with monsters and mutants. Rick Blood managed, after 100 years, to slay many beasts and bosses, eventually arised into a clock tower that imbued within him immense knowledge of everything, how the world works, how gods work, what significance he has in the world. finally, after all that, he escaped, mutated even further, so now he's even stronger than before, emerging 100 years later. Much in the world has changed. Being brought back into the world, Rick Blood was again offered immortality by Nibel, but must protect the world from the Age of Darkness, so he agreed, yet again. The Ancient Heart was not only the binding link between the dark dimension and the light, but it was now a vessel that contained Rick Blood's power and immortality. Should it shatter, so too would he. Nibel definitely learned how to make a deal no one could refuse, so it would seem. Rick Blood, having known that his name was legendary, changed it again this time to Rainier. Rainier arose during a time he found most comfortable, a time of war. This time frame, Veland is an empire sprawling throughout the west, a nation of dark elves ruled by vampires who are using legions of elves to rule the world. Orion, the center city, more or less kind of like a Constantinople if you will, is barely holding off Veland after 10 years of siege. Hexter, during this time period, has 30 different orc and ogre tribes that are all infighting for control. And to make matters worse, you have humans of Heronodon and Ecclesia battling in both areas, trying their best to hold Orion against the Dark Legion. Rainier came to the leader of Veland, Lord Valdemar, with a proposal. He would rally the orc and ogre tribes under one banner and rule alongside Veland as an allied nation of Hexter. In return, Veland gets its much-needed orc support and now has an immortal warlord supporting their emperor in all of his military campaigns. The deal was perfect. Only issue was that Rainier was independent, a fact that Valdemar was very upset with. After Rainier easily and brutally massacred the opposing orc tribes and rallied them under his command, the Dark Legion easily swept aside humanity and ruled over Orion for years to come. Veland researched and spied into Hexter many times over to find the Ancient Heart, knowing that the Ancient Heart controls Rainier. Only the most loyal would seek it, as Valdemar was scared for his enemies within his own empire to find the heart before him. Hexter ruled under Rainier, and ruled with strength. Impressing the young prince Lionheart with his intelligence and strength, Lionheart molded himself into a new person, a lapdog for Rainier, trying to learn his power and accumulate it for himself, an endeavor that goes ultimately nowhere due to Rainier's connection to the very gods of the world. With events remaining rather peaceful for 5-ish years, Rainier mostly dealt with Cadus and Ecclesian forces, wiping them out easily. This was until the Crusader War happened, when Heronodon launched out an all-out assault, taking Veland and Hexter by surprise, as they marched all the way into the Holy Ground being Hexter. This distracted Rainier enough to divert attention from Ecclesia to now slaughtering Heronodon and trying to grab them by the throat. And by the throat, he means their general, General Hugh. This led to a massive morale loss and led to conquering of half of Heronodon's land and holdings. Having no army, no general, and fighting the combined forces of Hexter and Veland, Heronodon was doomed. Ecclesia was still funneling troops into the Holy Ground during these months, and through their constant attacks of Hexter leaving Heronodon to its fate, Rainier had to pull back. He had to pull back to protect Hexter. For if someone got the Ancient Heart, the source of his free will and the source of his immortality, it could mean enslavement, or worse, the bringing of the Dark Dimension, the bringing of the Age of Darkness. Veland was really pissed, their forces now having to retreat as they could not fight the combined forces of elves, dwarves, and battered Heronodon army. With this happening, Heronodon retook its city of Essa and retook half of its lands back. fighting, pushing hard into Hexter, and redoubling their efforts under their new general, General Gerald. Hronodon's fury and anger lashing at Hexter and Velon was much to bear. While their forces were battered and scattered before, they were not so anymore. They were regrouped, veteraned from the near fall of their kingdom, and the new gear provided to them by the dwarves, with the magical aid of the elves. The Hronodon army was on par with Ecclesia, in terms of just sheer might. Rainier, trying to deal with Hronodon yet again, decided to go for their general, knowing that, just like before, without their general, Hronodon would fall back. Nearly killing Gerald, Rainier had to pull again and retreat in the middle of a fight, but Gerald's brother, Rupert, intervened and tried to stop Rainier. Rainier had no choice but to kill Gerald's own brother in front of him. Gerald, passing out and recovering later on, was pissed and would vow himself to go on an onslaught and endlessly chase for Rainier's head to avenge his fallen. General Hugh, Gerald's adoptive father, and Rupert, Gerald's brother. Rainier, though, spared Hronodon, as he now had more pressing matters to attend to. He needed to retreat from Hronodon and address Ecclesia. For you see, the Cadus, the Dark Elf, Velond rebels, they had guided Ecclesia to the Ancient Heart, and Ecclesia was planning on destroying the Ancient Heart. Rainier needed to make haste and chase after the Patriarch to stop his plan. Problem now being that Velon knows who has the Ancient Heart as well. So you have the Cadus, you have Velond, you have Hronodon, and you have Ecclesia. They're all chasing Rainier and the Patriarch. It is a clusterfuck, to say the least. Chase after chase, close battle followed by another. Lionheart, Rainier's overseer, was confused as to the importance of what is happening and questions him. Rainier spills some of the beans that if the Patriarch realizes the power of the Ancient Heart, then he would be enslaved and forced to carry out the Patriarch's will. Not only that, but the Age of Light, which is the age that they live in, would be destroyed should the humans destroy the Ancient Heart, which is their plan. Their plan is to destroy the Ancient Heart, believing that by destroying it, it would destroy the Dark Legion. But that's not true. By destroying the Ancient Heart, the Age of Darkness would consume the world and destroy everyone in it. Finally, this is after weeks, finally, at Ecclesia's very gates, the Patriarch is caught. But before Rainier can lay the finishing blow and smite him, the Pope uses the Ancient Heart and forces Rainier to do his bidding and to call a retreat. This shocks the Patriarchal Guard's captain and the Patriarchal Guard themselves. But the Patriarch says he will use this artifact to force Rainier to wipe out the Dark Legion, then destroy the artifact. Walter did not like that and said that the artifact is poisoning the Patriarch's mind with power, and forcefully, while the Patriarch's down on the ground, took the Ancient Heart from him. Running with the Ancient Heart, the Patriarchal Guards were now an independent army, and Rainier was fighting these fools as they blindly charged into the altar of Narwart. And by charging into the altar of Narwart, they smashed the relic. They did what they sought out to do. An army against armies. They did what the Patriarch could not do. They smashed the Ancient Heart and brought about Ankablosa. Ankablosa arrived. The Age of Darkness came, and Rainier was weakening to become immortal once more. Knowing what to do, Rainier ordered Lionheart to gather humanity's generals, General Gerald and General Kendall, to lead an army against Ankablosa. The plan went successful. Using a bone dragon and a bataloon to pierce into Ankablosa, Rainier, Kendall, Dwayne, all of them were teleported into the Dark Dimension, a place Rainier has seen before. Inside the Dark Dimension, Rainier mutated further, but was succumbing to nightmares of his wife, His wife begging him to talk to her, begging him to forgive her, begging him to come back to her. Enkablosa, the god of darkness, talked to Rainier and said to him that he knew what chases him, he knew what plagues his mind, and that he knew how to cure him, how to save him from pain, how to save him from all this discomfort that's been plaguing him centuries after centuries. He could take his pain away. Rainier, after many attempts of resisting, finally gave in. Enkablosa gave Rainier a quest, and upon gathering the needed items, Enkablosa told Rainier that in order for the purge himself of the memories of his dead wife and daughter, and to finally be free of the pain that has held him his whole life, he would need to tell their stories. So, amidst a bonfire of the illusion of his wife and daughter burning and screaming in agony once more, Rainier told their story about how his wife tried to kill his daughter, about how he left for war and abandoned his family over and over and over. And after telling their stories, they disappeared from his mind. He deleted the memories of them, and he was finally free of pain. And this is when Enkablosa told him, "You are now my champion. Become my champion and bring about the Age of Darkness. You will not only be immortal, but you will be able to rule the world as a warlord of unimaginable power." Having accepted this deal, this is where we leave off. Rainier takes up the mantle of Bringer of Darkness and charges back into the world 150 years later. Oh boy. Okay, so that was long, and we just talked about his entire history. So let's move on to summarizing his abilities and his powers. Rainier has incredible strength. He can slam an ogre on his back with a single punch. He wields a massive sword that is as large as him, standing around 7 feet tall. If you were an average-sized man on a horse, you would barely look over Rainier's head. This guy is large and loaded with muscle. Not only is he deadly in the field of war as a muscle machine, but he is also deadly in magic, able to imbue himself and his weapon with fire. He causes massive explosions with every swipe of his blade, and sends a shockwave underground whenever he slams his fire emblazoned sword down. Being immortal comes and goes in Rainier's life, as we talked about. He has fluctuated from being alive, to undead, to immortal, to human once again. No matter the state of his being, his power stays the same. He's able to crush any and all opponents with sheer force. Lastly, it's kind of important, is his knowledge. Rainier possesses a great mind, able to read people and identify weaknesses in godly beings. He is a mastermind of warfare. Problems that we see with Rainier is that he can be a little bit apathetic, and that uncaring nature sometimes bites him in the ass. For example, he does not care what happens in Veland. That bites him in the ass, because when Veland and the Cadis come after him for his power, had he spent the time and cared enough to deal with those issues, he might not have had that problem. That is really the main issue of this character, is that Rainier strives for stability. He claims Hexter, but he does nothing with it, content on staying in the holy ground. Same when he ruled the Dark Legion in the War of Heroes. He preferred staying in his kingdom. It was only when he was captured by the Lich Kiliani that his second-in-command Richter led the Dark Legion to plague humanity, nearly wiping out all the human races. So, if you haven't guessed it yet, Rainier is a bit of a tortured character. From his earliest days to now, he was always tormented. Striving to do what he did best, it tore him away from his wife and daughter. Feeling deep pain that it was his fault his daughter was born the way she was, and that it was his fault his wife lost her mind. He kept distracting himself by going to war, something to block his mind and preoccupy himself with. And that is ultimately the hardest thing to witness. When a man can't cope with the reality of his consequences and seeks to drown out his pain by being busy, the problems never go away, and never do they resolve in a peaceful manner. With his wife trying to kill his daughter, and him being a dutiful father and protecting his family, sending his wife to an asylum to die while his daughter succumbed years later to a village fire. Again, had he stayed, had he broke from the stress, he might have killed his own family. Or realize that they needed him, and he would change, he would shape himself into a better husband that his wife always wanted, and shape himself into a father that could have future kids and be the father figure they needed. But by running away and by busying himself with war, he shut himself out and stunted himself, forever foregoing a chance of ever healing. We see that he cares little for anybody. No care if someone pledges allegiance or if someone dies. To Rick Blood, he's already dead. Being immortal and busying himself with work like defending the ancient heart was a blessing to him, as he could not live with death. Death being the dark dimension where he would be tormented with a constant reminder of his memories, where his wife and daughter would plague him in constant fire, screaming for him, telling him how much they loved him. He needed to live, and he needed to be busy to keep his own wife and daughter out of his mind. We see that. The strongest man in the world, the greatest threat to a nation, fallen to his knees and broken when he got stuck in the dark dimension and had to keep dealing with the fragments of his wife and daughter. Women are the bane of men, for they become man's ultimate weakness. Behind any strong man is a woman that could cripple him deeper than any blade could. This is Rick Miner. This is Rainier. This is Rick Blood. With that, I hope you enjoyed this video and enjoyed the hour or so long discussion we have had. Rick Miner had many achievements, from ruling empires to destroying nations, having been a member of the Zox Knights and saving the world multiple times over. He was a hero to many, but a disaster to millions. Serving from a villain to a hero, time and time again, the lines got blurry. And as I summarized, this was not ultimately important to him. Conquering Hexter, conquering the world, these were all distractions that served for him to keep his mind away from the pain deep in his heart. A soldier without a home, a warrior without passion. This is ultimately Rick Miner. See you guys next time.